Well, we've been talking about the Holy Spirit. Last week we started a new part of it where we're talking about trust and obey. And what does it mean to trust and obey? And how does trust and obey work? The Holy Spirit touches our hearts. But He doesn't do it just randomly. And He doesn't do it without purpose. He has a purpose in all He does. God said all His purposes were set before He set time. He knows all things are going to happen. He knows all the past. He knows our history. So the Holy Spirit is there to help us keep on track. When we're on track and things are good, we're filled with the Holy Spirit. Our lives are good and we're doing the right things. Even in the midst of bad things going on around us, we're on the right track. But every now and then we have a tendency as humans to get off a track. And when we do, that's when the bad things happen. Staying on track is not the easiest thing to do. Why? Because we have the devil. Talked about it in Sunday school this morning. Devil can't read your mind. That's a misconception. God can read your mind. Jesus can read your mind. The Holy Spirit can read your mind. But the devil is an angel. Let's go back to that. Who was the devil? Lucifer. You know what he was called in heaven? What his proper name was? The angel of light. The beautiful one. That's who Lucifer was. What happened to Lucifer? Lucifer got pride because he was the beautiful one. Okay? And in that pride, he thought, I can be God. And he took a third of the angels behind him and tried to overthrow the throne of God. Well, guess what? He failed. And for that pride, he was cast down to the earth. So 1/3 of the angelic host live here on earth, and what do we call them? Demons, right? But what are they? They're fallen angels with all the power of angels. They cannot read your mind. What do? Whether it's the demon or the devil himself, what does he do? He watches your eyes and he listens to your mouth. Somebody said, the devil made me do it. No, the devil didn't make you do it. The devil listened to you. He watched what your eyes are looking at, and he goes, oh, I know just what to put in front of that person to make them go off track. Oh, they like this type of a car, and every time they drive down the road, they see one of those, they look at that car. Okay? Well, what do I need to do? I need to put an opportunity in front of them to do something they shouldn't be doing. Maybe it's to buy a car you can't afford. Maybe it's to buy something you saw on TV that you can't afford. The devil knows how to do that in a way to entice you to sin. But is the sin the devil? No. All sin is human. What is it based on? We're fallen creations. So that's why when we became a Christian, God said, okay, let me fix this. We're going to put the Holy Spirit inside of you, and He's your door knocker. When the devil shows you that thing that you really want that you shouldn't have, he's going to knock on your heart and say, you know, you really shouldn't do that. And we have a choice. Okay, free will. We can listen to the Holy Spirit and not do what He's telling us. That little voice inside of you saying, you know, you really shouldn't do that. But then there's the human side of you that says, but boy, it would be so good. Okay? So which way do you go? So when you listen and you follow that thing that the devil shows you and you fall, what do? You have to ask for forgiveness. And we talked about it last week. The minute you ask for forgiveness, because of that microphone inside of you that's connected directly to the ear of God called the Holy Spirit, The minute you ask for forgiveness, He forgives you. Jesus says, I already got that. I paid for that. But staying on track is not easy. I have to apologize to my church. Last week I got off track. We were having a business meeting right up here. And some things were said which got on my pride. And I am a defensive person. Okay? And I took it as an attack. And I said things and shut people down and hurt feelings that I shouldn't have done. And I had to go to God and ask for forgiveness for that. Everybody's opinion is equal to anybody else's, including mine. Especially more than mine. And I need to let other people have their say. And sometimes, when I get on a tear, and you've done this too, when there's certain things you're very strong about, do you listen to other people? Do you hear what they have to say? No. Your mind's already going this way, and that's the way you're going to go. I'm no different. I fail sometimes, not just my family and friends, but sometimes I'll fail my church. But at least I have the Holy Spirit inside of me that goes, hey, that was wrong. What you did was wrong. You need to apologize for that. You need to make that right, or as right as you can. Because here's something that's very, we all know this. Once it comes out of your mouth, can you drag it back? No. Once it comes out of your mouth, it's there. Once it's hurt that feeling's hurt. Sometimes it takes a long time to heal that. But you still, it's your responsibility to go back and make things as right as you can make them. You know? That's all you can do. We're going to look at a few people here. This is Moses. This next one, trust and obey, can only be done by the Holy Spirit. So here's Moses. We know the story of Moses. We've been studying it on Wednesday nights. We've seen this whole series about how Moses led the children out of the promised land. But we're going to go back to a part where it all started. Now Moses has already been a prince in Egypt. He's already killed an Egyptian. He's already had to run away. He's hiding out in the desert with now his father-in-law because he got married while he was out there, Jethro. And he's taking care of sheep. And we talked about that. The Lord purposely put him out there taking care of sheep, getting him ready to be the leader of Israel. So in this, we have Exodus 3 through 6. Then Moses said, I will now turn aside and see this great sight, why the bush does not burn. So when the Lord saw that he turned aside to look, the God called to him from the midst of the burning bush, Moses, Moses. And he said, here I am. You know, some people, if a burning bush started speaking to you, would get scared and run away. But Moses, because of the way he had been raised, understood there was a God in heaven. And he's seeing the miracle, and because God prepared him and prepared his heart, instead of running away, he said, here I am. Then he, God, said, do not draw near this place. Take your sandals off your feet, for the place where you stand is holy ground. Now in the Bible, there's only several places that this has happened. It happened with Joshua, when Joshua went to meet the angel, when he saw all the angels around the hills in chariots and ready to do battle. The angel said to him, take off your shoes, because the ground you're on is holy ground. Well, that particular ground was nothing special. What made it holy was the presence of the Lord. This is holy ground. No, we don't have to take our shoes off when we come in the door. Okay? You don't want me doing that in the first place. But this is holy ground. Not because there's anything special about the building. It's because the Lord is here. What do you mean the Lord's here? If we are here and we are Christians and the Holy Spirit is inside of us and you bring enough of that Holy Spirit together and you brighten the light enough where 2 or 3 are gathered, what did Jesus say? I will be there with you. So Jesus, the Lord, is here. What does that do? That makes this holy ground. When the church, people get this wrong all the time. The church is not the building. We are the church. The church is the church when the people come together. That's what makes it the church. Without that, it might as well be a warehouse to hold a bunch of benches. People get so caught up in the building of the church and making the church so nice and everything else, they forget the only thing we're doing this for is to honor God. We want to come into a place that's nice, that we can meet with the Lord, because would you want the Lord? There are days I would not want the Lord to walk into my house. When I'm in the middle, right now, I got my garage tore apart. There is stuff everywhere. We're in the middle of building shelves and stuff. Would I want the Lord to walk in there right now? No, not really. So why do we keep the church the way we do? We want to be proud when the Lord meets with us. Meets with His body. Do you think the Lord really cares? Well, He cared enough. He had Solomon make a temple, right? So He cared enough about that. And He says, and my presence will be in this place. And you will meet with me in this place. Moreover, He said, I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob. And Moses hid his face, for he was afraid to look upon God. Was God standing there? No. But was God's presence there? Absolutely. In that burning bush, God's presence was there, and it scared Moses. Not enough that he ran away, though. And Moses hid his face, for he was afraid to look on God. And the Lord said, I have surely seen the oppression of my people who are in Egypt. I have heard their cries because of their taskmasters, for I know their sorrows. God does not ignore the hurting of His people. Did He allow it to go on? Yeah, 400 years. Now, do you understand that 400 years there in Egypt was not all bad years? That first several hundred years, what was it? The Egyptians remembered what was done for them by the Israelis. Who was it that went into Egypt as a slave and came out as the second person in Egypt? Joseph, right? Joseph was the one that saved Egypt. When there was a dearth for 7 years, Joseph was the one that says, okay, we need to save up all the corn and the grain. He saved the whole region. They remembered that for hundreds of years. But then it says, a Pharaoh came who didn't remember Joseph. And you know what happened? He looked out at all these Israelis and he goes, you know what? There's more of them than there are of us. What if we get in a fight and they go on somebody else's side? Then they'll outnumber us and we'll lose. We got to do something about this. And that Pharaoh made their task hard, thinking if I make their task hard enough, they will start shrinking in how big. And what happened? The harder he made their task, the more they grew. So then he had another plan, foul plan. He says, we're going to drown all the babies, all the male babies. Well, now, anybody knows, okay, I may be the only deer hunter here, but it's deer management. We have this thing, if you're going to go out and shoot a buck in certain states, you have to shoot 2 doe before you can shoot 1 buck. I didn't understand that at first, but if you shoot 1 buck, a buck may have 6 or 7 does, okay, that follow him. But if you shoot the doe's not going to have the baby the next year. You're reducing the population. So God even made a fallacy in the idea of the Pharaoh's mind to kill the boy children. The boy children didn't change anything. Okay? He understood the sorrows of his people. Moses was one of those that was put in a basket, put in the lake, but what happened? You know the story. The Pharaoh's own daughter saw the basket, was curious, had him bring the basket, opened up, and there was one of the Israeli children. She goes, okay, I'm going to take that as my son. She was barren. She couldn't have children. So she took Moses to be her child. He was raised as a prince in the palace of Egypt. He knew all the Egyptian theories and ideas and what they called their gods and their ceremonies and all that. He knew all that. Plus, guess what happened? The princess hired his own mother to be his nursemaid. And what did his mother do? She taught him all the ways of the Israelis too. So he knew both sides. What more perfect person for God to pick to send to Pharaoh to bring the kids out, bring the nation of Israel out, than to take somebody who knew both all the information about the Egyptians and all the information about the Hebrews and knew who the Hebrew God was. God took that man, trained him in the desert, and now it says, Moses, I'm picking you. Come, therefore, I will send you to Pharaoh, that you may bring my people, the children of Israel, out of Egypt. But Moses said to God, who am I that I should go to Pharaoh, and that I should bring the children of Israel out of Egypt? You see, God knew more about Moses than he knew about himself. Moses looked at himself as a failure. Moses says, I was a prince in the palace. And then I tried to defend one of my fellow Israelites, and for that I was condemned to death, and I had to run out to this desert here, and I've been living here all this time tending sheep. I'm a failure. Who am I for me to go to Egypt? Matter of fact, there's a death sentence waiting for me if I go back to Egypt. So he said, God, I will certainly be with you, and this shall be the sign that I have sent you. When you have brought the people of Israel out of Egypt, you shall serve God on this mountain. God knew him. God didn't say, just go. God said, I will be with you. You know, when you're going to go on a trip, has anybody ever gotten in a car and tried to go on a trip all by yourself on a long distance? It's hard to do, isn't it? Trying to stay awake. Okay? The boring. Trying to find all the music stations so you can keep yourself entertained while you're on that long trip. God didn't do that to Moses. God says, I will be with you. I'm going to be there. I'm going to strengthen you. I'm going to make sure things go right. Did everything go right for Moses in this thing when he went to Pharaoh? No. Everything that could go wrong went wrong. Every miracle he did, Pharaoh's magicians came and did them. Till a certain point. When it hit a certain point, Pharaoh's magicians couldn't do what God was doing. And the magicians at one point looked at Pharaoh and go, "Hey Pharaoh, yeah, that ain't magic. That's God doing that. You need to listen to Moses." And Pharaoh still wouldn't listen to Moses. Why? God, through the Holy Spirit, hardened Pharaoh's heart. Why? So he could show his glory in the miracles he was going to do. What did God tell Moses to do? Bring the people of Israel here to this mountain, to Mount Sinai, to worship me. We know the rest of the story. We know what happened. The people of Israel did leave. They went through the Red Sea. They went through all those trials, and they ended up there. Why? Because a man named Moses, which God had prepared from his very birth, said the words, "Here am I. What do you need me to do?" Is your heart prepared to listen to the Lord? Are you prepared through the Holy Spirit to say, to trust and obey? Moses trusted that that was God. Scared him to death, didn't it? But then he had to obey. He had to go do what God told him to do. Sometimes trusting is the easy part. The doing of it is a whole different thing. I have kids in my school, and we have a term for it. It's called passive aggressive. Okay? It's one of those psychological terms. What passive aggressive is I tell you, "Hey, I need you to go do this, this, this," and the kid goes, "Sure, no problem, I'll get that done." And then he doesn't do anything. He'll say anything that he thinks you want to hear so that you will leave him alone, but then he doesn't do what he's asked to do. That's called passive aggressive. He didn't look at you and throw something at you and say, "I ain't going to do that." That's what the other son did, by the way, in the Bible story. "I ain't doing that." But what happened to him? Holy Spirit touched his heart, told him what you said to your dad was wrong, and he went and did what he was supposed to do. He's the one that obeyed, even though originally he said, "I'm not going to do that." Oh, well, let's go back to Moses for a second. Did Moses right away say, "Oh yeah, I'll go and I'll take care of that, Lord"? No, he tried to make every excuse in the world. First, he says, I got a lisp. I don't talk well. Lord, you need to get somebody who's an orator, who talks well. And God says, "I said I'd be with you. Also, let me do something. Isn't Aaron your brother? Yeah. Doesn't he talk good? Yeah, well, I'm going to send him with you too, and he can take care of that part of you." Sometimes God has to do things like that. But we still have to trust that God can handle it. We can make all the excuses in the world, and we can either do it or not do it. We can be either way. We can be the passive-aggressive person who agrees with God and says, "I'll do anything you tell me to do," and then not do it. Or we can sometimes be like Moses did. He goes, "Well, I don't think I can do this." But then he went and did what God told him to do. My next one we'll have to go through real quick is Daniel. Okay? Daniel trusted and he obeyed. He trusted God fully. There was no doubt in anybody's mind that knew Daniel, that knew that he didn't trust God and would do anything God told him to do. God felt Daniel was one of those special people. Daniel 6:10. "And now then Daniel knew that the writing was signed." Once the writing was signed, it says, "No one is to pray to anybody except for the emperor for so many days." And he went home, and in his upper chamber, and he opened the windows where people could see him toward Jerusalem, and he knelt down on his knees 3 times a day and prayed and gave thanks before the Lord for his God as he was accustomed to doing. So in the first time, this is what he normally did. Now, his enemies knew that he did this. They knew when they wrote this and they got the emperor to sign this, that this was going to be a problem for Daniel. So Daniel did what he has always done. I wish that I was that good, that 3 times a day. I hope I get to a couple times a day, but at 3 times a day I can take a break and go sit down with the Lord and go through my prayers and everything. But Daniel did that every day, 3 times a day. So these people caught him doing it and went to the emperor and said, "Didn't you sign a writing saying that nobody is to pray to anybody but you? Well, this Daniel man that you put over us," and that's what the problem was, because he was over them, he's still doing it. He's still doing what you said he shouldn't do. And the emperor, it said that he spent all night. Daniel 6, 18 through 20. Now the king went to his palace and spent all night fasting. No musicians were brought before him. Also his sleep went from him when the king arose early in the morning, and he went in haste to the lion's den. Before that, the previous day, he spent all day in the books of the law trying to find a loophole. You know, our Congress does that all the time. They try to find loopholes. Rich people find loopholes to not pay taxes. The king, his own writing, his own decree, he tried to find a loophole to get out of putting Daniel in the lion den. Why? Because the king loved Daniel. Daniel was special to the king. The king would have done anything for Daniel, but they caught him, they trapped him. It'd be like the Congress sneakily writing a bill and getting the president to sign it. Once the president signed it, he found out that this thing that he signed was a really bad thing. And he didn't want to do it, but he was stuck. Well, that's what this man was. And when he came to the den, he cried out with a lamenting. Help me with that word. Lamenting. Lamenting, thank you. Lamenting voice to Daniel. The king spoke, saying, "Daniel, servant of the Most High God, has your God, whom you serve continually, been able to deliver you from the lion's den?" You know what Daniel said to that king? "O king, live forever." He honored the king. And he said, "Yes, God sent an angel here to protect me." God sometimes allows us to get in bad situations. He promises He's going to be there with us. But He'll allow us to get in bad situations. Is it so much for us or for the others who see the situation? What impact do you think it had on all the servants of the palace who knew Daniel had been thrown in that lion's den and he didn't die? God saved him. And the king put out a decree saying, "The God of Daniel is God." You see the impact that had? It didn't just change Daniel. It didn't just change the king. It changed all the people of the nation, because that king put out a decree to the whole nation saying the God of Daniel is God. Now they were in what was Babylonian area at this time is the area of Darius, Persian area. There were hundreds of gods. And here the king of the nation says, the God of Daniel, He's the real God. All these other gods, they're not real. Daniel made an impact, not just because he trusted God, but even though it caused him to go to a lion den, he obeyed. Trusting and obeying is not always an easy thing. I want to thank you for being here at Frontenac Baptist Church here in Cocoa, Florida with us as we're going through this series And we're learning about trusting and obey. It's a precious, precious time for us. This is a lesson that touches every heart of every Christian. I hope you're getting benefits from it. Once again, thank you for being here. Join us on Facebook or YouTube at Frontenac Baptist Church here in Cocoa, Florida.